Lauren, tell me when we are live. Good evening, everybody online and everybody in the room. Welcome to this very special event. My name is Joe Woolley. I'm the CEO of the Nashville LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and we are so proud to be bringing you this program tonight. When our incredible members, the Nashville Stars, brought it to our attention and said, do you want to partner? We were like, absolutely, let's collaborate. Michelle, thank you so much for that. And we're so excited to be here at this beautiful hotel, which is also a member of ours, Margaritaville Hotel Nashville. It's great to have them back open after the pandemic that we are still in, but coming out of, knock on wood. But this hotel opened right before the pandemic and jumped in to be inclusive and welcome everybody. And our hospitality industry was hit hard. So we're glad to see them open and up and running. Board members of the Chamber and Nashville Stars, if you'll raise your hand, thank you all for being here. To Lauren Bland, our membership manager, thank you. Could not have done this without you. And Lauren with the Nashville Stars. Thanks everybody for joining us. Yes, give them a round of applause. So we're here tonight to celebrate Black History Month and the intersectionality of LGBT people and Black people. And this is a wonderful way to do it. All major sporting teams in Nashville are now members of the Nashville LGBT Chamber and support the community. They have pride nights, they do different things. Nashville Stars are no exception, but that's not always been the case with major league sports. It's not been the case until very recently. And homophobia in sports goes way, way back. Our Nashville Predators just drafted an openly gay hockey player, Luke Prokop. We are so proud of him and the Predators for being such an inclusive team. And it's because of trailblazers like Glenn Burke that inclusion and diversity in sports is possible. So we are, again, so proud to be hearing his incredible story and hearing from this amazing author. It really is an honor that you are speaking to us here tonight. To introduce our author and our host, I am going to introduce you to John Lohr, the Managing Director of Music City Baseball. Thank you all again for being here. John?
Joe, I want to thank you and welcome everybody here. And we appreciate having the opportunity to be here. Andrew and I have a little bit of history together, so I'm excited about that. Andrew and I met almost 4 years ago. When we first got involved with the name the Nashville Stars and the brand and the connection to the Negro Leagues, Tim Corbin, who was on our advisory board, introduced me to David Williams. Andrew had worked with David for many years, and we had the opportunity to spend time together before David passed and really kind of supported each other kind of through that process. So, again, I'm glad you're here. We've been talking about this project for a couple of years. Music City Baseball really is the initiative to bring Major League Baseball to this market. I've been here a little over 3 years, and our focus really is to provide an opportunity for Major League Baseball to either expand and or relocate a team. Our organizational job, is to really provide a real estate opportunity large enough, and a smaller piece of that being an entertainment district. Some of you are familiar with Atlanta, the Battery, something along those lines. Really, those are the two pieces of the puzzle that are required before MLB, can come to the market. What we've been doing the last 3 years is really just proving that the market works. We did an extensive study and looked at markets throughout the United States and 2 international markets. Nashville is a market that's really, Major League Baseball will say, they won't expand until Tampa and Oakland are resolved. Nashville is really one of the top markets that they'd like to be in, Nashville and Vegas. So they hold this expansion market and a relocation market very close to their vest. So that's really what we're all about. And a lot of people think that we're a team. We have a massive budget, and we don't. So, but what we do is try to show up. We try to do a lot more than we say. We really focus on opportunities. Obviously, because of our brand, the Nashville Stars, and the connection to the Negro Leagues, diversity, equity, and inclusion have always been part of our philosophy, right? And it's really, the brand itself has become part of our DNA. It wasn't the plan when we first got here, but it's really become part of it. Our partnership with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum the fact that it's Black History Month, the opportunity to talk about this topic specifically. This partnership, it helps facilitate that process, because our objective is to use the voice of sports as the bridge, as bringing people together, uniting people. And it happened years and years and years ago with Jackie Robinson. David's comment was, this opportunity is bigger than the game of baseball. You have the opportunity to bring people together, use sports to influence society. And really that's our focus, right? So, let me, I know you want to get to the speaker. Let me introduce the person who's going to introduce Andrew. Frederick, I know. They wanted me to say a few words, so I thank you. Let me lastly say, your support means everything to us. Our objective is to support your organization. Please, MLBmusiccity.com, buy merchandise, go sign up for a newsletter. And on that, Frederick Strobel has been working with us for a little over a year. We brought Frederick in to help us on the marketing side. Burgundy Group is a local marketing company in Nashville. Amazing. He has really helped shape our messaging. So everything you see weekly, it comes out on our Thursday post. And this is really a responsibility of Frederick and Chris Bacon as well. My last comment, Amish wrote, I want you to raise your hand. Margaritaville, thank you very much. Amish is one of our board members. Lauren, thank you. Connor, everybody that's involved in this, putting this event together. And I'll introduce you to Frederick Strobel.
Thank you, John. Thank you, and I promise I'm the last one to talk before they actually get to talk, and the people you want to hear from get the chance to talk to you. John, thank you very much. It's a delight to be working with Music City Baseball and to talk about the Nashville Stars. I grew up here in Nashville. This is home for me. Sulphur Dell's a place I traipsed around. I had the distinction, the honor of playing on what we believe was the first integrated baseball team in Nashville when I was a 12-year-old in 1963, playing for Machinist Union 155, and was teammates with Howard Gentry and Walter Overton and Robert Cobb and some wonderful individuals in this city. So this has a special place for me. The message I got was, we need to talk. Andrew Maraniss, about 8 years ago. At that time, my company was working with one of our clients, Father Ryan High School, on a 3-year program to promote the integration of schools and athletic fields in Nashville. Andrew had sent this email. We had run a little something in the paper that talked about an upcoming game. And it just so happened that he was about to publish his very first book, Strong Inside, about Perry Wallace, one of the stars of that particular era. One of the most important people, not just one of the most important athletes, one of the most important people in Nashville's history. He was right. We did need to talk. And it began a relationship that is now 8 years old and going stronger. What it provided each of us during that time was an opportunity to work together to promote what we were both trying to do, which was to celebrate a powerful time in Nashville's history and some people who were instrumental in bringing that about. I got a number of benefits as a result of that. I got to know Andrew's dad, who's with us tonight, David Maraniss, his mother, Linda, his baseball-loving kids, absolutely baseball-loving kids, Eliza and Charlie, and he...
Brian's going to teach them how to hit here.
Oh, there you go. Be ready. It's going to happen. And I also got the benefit of hiring his wife, Allison, who has been working at the Burgundy Group for a number of years and makes our firm significantly better every day and with every project on which she works. I knew that Andrew worked at Vanderbilt, and he's been in the athletics department. I knew from this work that he was an author, but what I really didn't know was all the things that he was doing. Saying he worked in the athletics department at Vanderbilt says a little bit, but you talk to folks at the athletics department, he's not just a writer there, and he's not just somebody who helps with events. He is intimately and consistently involved in everything that's happening in that way, and in celebrating what that department and what that university continues to do in this particular realm. What I also learned when they said it was an author is I read his first book, and I discovered he's not just an author. He's not an ordinary author. Andrew is a discoverer. He's a discoverer of interesting stories about fascinating people whose lives have an incredible impact on the communities in which they live, and whose lives have a story to tell us and to teach us. Whether it was Perry Wallace and his story at Pearl and at Vanderbilt as the first African-American athlete to sign a grant and aid the SEC, A book, by the way, that was the only book in 2015 that was honored with a special recognition by the Robert F. Kennedy Book Awards. Or his next book, Games of Deception, about the very first U.S. Olympic basketball team. The first year it was played as a sport in the Olympics in Berlin in 1936, and getting to know more about the people who brought that together. Or the book we're going to hear about tonight, and the story of Glenn Burke. Knowing Andrew has been a real treat and a real delight, and he was right. We needed to talk, and we continue to talk, whether it's over coffee at Frothy Monkey or opportunities such as this. And I know we're going to have a wonderful time tonight being able to hear more from him about this particular work. So I'm going to introduce Andrew Maraniss as our first participant up here, but we've got a special part of this particular one. Many times when you go to a book signing and a book conversation, the person who's talking might be a bookseller, the person might be talking may just be a publicist. We got somebody today who's got a real vested interest in the story that Andrew has been telling and continues to tell. I thought about this the other day. I'm a Yankees fan from way back. How it happened here in Nashville, I can't explain. But Mantle and Maris and Mercer and Mattingly and the rest were my heroes. And I remember a story in Sports Illustrated when Dave Winfield in 1984 was trying to explain how talented Don Mattingly was. And he said, "You ever seen those big old pickup trucks loaded with vegetables that go down the road? Have you ever seen one of those construction trucks that's just got tools falling out of everything?" He said, "That's Don Mattingly. He's got more tools. He's got more vegetables. He's got more talent than folks out there know. And if something falls off the side of it, so what? He's got many more out there." Well, the individual who's going to be interviewing and talking with and sharing this evening tonight with Andrew is a Don Mattingly type person. Bryan Ruby is a professional baseball player. He just finished up a stint in Salem, Oregon, in the Maverick League. As I remember, 335 was your batting average there. That was after a winter league performance in Guatemala, 326. As I remember the batting average of that particular one. That's one part of his story. The other part, though, is that he is a songwriter, and not just a casual songwriter. This past year, 12 of his compositions have been recorded by country music artists. That's 1 year, 12. Obviously, numbers are important in the baseball world. They're important in this world as well. And he is the other thing that's important to him, and why it ties so nicely into the story of Glenn Burke and what he endured and what he brought to the world back in the late 70s and early 80s, is that Bryan is the only active professional baseball player who is, and to use the term you had in your article, I was struck by this in the article in USA Today. It wasn't coming out; it was inviting in, and that is what he is. He heads up a non-for-profit, proud to be in baseball, that's designed to help LGBTQ youth embrace themselves and gain their confidence through baseball. It's a real interesting opportunity here, and I know the two of them, they both will tell you this is a conversation more so than an interview. And what a delight to have somebody who connects to Glenn Burke in so many ways to tell a story about what it meant then, and maybe more important, what it means now. Bryan Ruby, Andrew Maraniss, welcome.
Thank you, Frederick. All right. Thanks for having us. I guess I'm the moderator here. So I'm used to being the one who's being interviewed. So it's like role reversal. I got a little cheat sheet here. Let's get right into it. Andrew, why were you first interested in Glenn Burke, and how did you find out about him?
Okay. And I just reminded me, when you said that we met at Frothy Monkey for the first time, I got an email from someone essentially saying we need to talk. And it was Bryan, who had just read this book.
Yeah.
And where did we go to talk? It was Frothy Monkey. Maybe we come to Margaritaville next time. So this was my third book. As Frederick mentioned, the first two, Strong Inside and Games of Deception, both of those books attempting to use sports to really talk about social issues that are important. So racism and the civil rights movement in the case of Perry's story, anti-Semitism and fascism in the case of the book about the basketball team at the 36 Olympics. So I was looking for another way to use sports, talk about an important issue. with Strong Inside, I initially wrote it for adults, and then I adapted it for middle school and high school students. And so for about 2 years, I was traveling around doing a mix of speaking at senior citizens' homes, and then at a middle school. And I recognized that this Perry Wallace's story sort of resonated with everybody, regardless, but I especially liked being in the school environment where maybe there was a kid who saw a basketball player on the cover of the book who didn't really show up at the library very often, or reading they didn't think was their thing yet, but sports was. And then they got turned on to reading because of the sports angle of the book, but really then they got more than they bargained for in the book. So I decided to stop writing strictly for adults and to try to be a bit of a crossover author for teenagers and adults. And so that's what Games of Deception is. And that's what I wanted to do with this book on Glenn is I felt like middle school and high school kids did not have much, if any, sports nonfiction on an LGBTQ character, right? And that would be something that was needed and valued both by straight and gay kids in schools, But also for me, I love baseball. That's it's always been my favorite sport. My dad's here. He can attest to that. Probably 95% of our conversations revolve around baseball to this day still, and I grew up playing baseball. He did too. 1970s, when this story takes place, was my sort of first era of recognizing who players were and collecting baseball cards. I remember having Glenn's card. And so I just thought that this would be an interesting way to write about a player who most people really don't know the story of during a time of the gay rights movement and backlash to that movement in the 1970s. And it brought together everything I was looking for, an interesting sports story, but an interesting social story as well.
Great. That's a great place to start. Growing up, were you aware? I mean, you say you had his baseball card. Were you aware of the extent of the story? What did you know about Glenn Burke?
Growing up, I did not know. And I was talking to Eric, who was a Dodger fan at this era. Dodger fans at the time didn't know that Glenn was gay. His teammates did, for the most part, in the minor leagues and with the Dodgers. Certainly management of the Dodgers did, and we can talk more about that. But that's one thing that's so great about Music City baseball and the emphasis on inclusion is that baseball has a lot of work to do there, And when the Dodgers learned that Glenn was gay, and not only that he was friends with Tommy Lasorda's son, who was also gay, they essentially tried to bribe him to cover it up. They wanted him to get married, and he said to a woman. And when they said yes, he said, "No, I'm not going to do that." And so he was gone. Oakland A's manager Billy Martin said he wasn't going to let Glenn, quote unquote, contaminate his team. So when people when you think about the environment of baseball and of sports, that's why I admire you so much. What you did this year so courageous is you don't know what their reaction is going to be. We do have on the record what the reaction was from some of the guys that came before you, like Glenn. But I didn't know about that aspect of Glenn's story. He did come out in 1982, which was after his playing careers when he publicly came out. It was a cover story in Inside Sports magazine and an interview with Bryant Gumbel on the Today Show when Bryant Gumbel was brand new. It was his first year on the Today Show, but they knew each other from Los Angeles. I was only 12 then. I didn't know that story then, but over the years, I learned that, more about Glenn. The other interesting thing about him is that he invented the high five. So not only is he considered the first openly gay Major League Baseball player, but he's also considered the inventor of something that people all over the world know and do. I can tell that story. So it was the 1977 season. The Dodgers already had 3 players who had hit 30 or more home runs. Dusty Baker had 29. He was stuck on 29 for most of the last month of the season. If he were to hit one more homer, they would become the first team in Major League history with 4 players with 30 homers. And like in a movie, it comes down to the last game of the season. J.R. Richard is on the mound for the Astros. He's throwing 100 miles an hour. Dusty thinks there's no way he's going to hit this home run. His first 2 at-bats, he doesn't. So he's resigned to the fact that he's going to let his team down. In his last at-bat of the game, he hits the home run. And Glenn Burke is standing in the on-deck circle. And he said that he was just lifted by the crowd, just cheering, going crazy for Dusty's homer. And he raised his arm up in the air, and Dusty Baker slapped it. And the Dodgers coined the term high five and started using that on posters and programs. And I asked Dusty because some people say he invented it, so it takes two to high five. And he said that he gives all the credit to Glenn because Glenn was from the Bay Area. He was from Oakland, Berkeley. And he said most of the cool things in life come from the Bay Area, and which is a risky thing to say as a Dodger, knowing that rivalry.
Right.
But he gave all credit to Glenn.
Wow. So he invented the high five. He's the first openly gay major leaguer, even though he came out after retiring, but still absolutely groundbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Why does the mainstream, why do people not really know about him?
Yeah, why isn't his story
Why
better
isn't
known?
his story got out there? Yeah.
I think there's some similarities to Perry Wallace's story in some ways, where the organization that he was most closely associated with was not interested in promoting the story. The Dodgers to this day have not mentioned Glenn on their website. They've never tweeted about him. And I know the Dodgers have done amazing things when it comes to LGBT community. You threw out the first pitch there, right?
Yeah.
Billie Jean King is one of the owners of the team. They are credited with having a great Pride night. Billy Beane played for the Dodgers, who's now an exec with Major League Baseball, who was the second out Major League player after Glenn. So credit to the Dodgers for a lot, but they, for whatever reason, have not acknowledged Glenn. I think it has to do with being uncomfortable with the relationship with Tommy Lasorda, who never acknowledged that his own son was gay. Oakland A's had the Glenn Burke Pride Night this year. They renamed their Pride Night after Glenn, which was a good step in the right direction. But that's, again, 40 years after he played, and they did not want to have anything to do with the book at their Pride Night. Neither team. The Nashville Stars are the first. I know you said you're not a team yet, but you're going to be a team. This has been a story that MLB has stayed away from. I think just a little bit of embarrassment about the way that Glenn was treated, the fact that he was run out of the game just for who he was. But my opinion, that's the exact wrong approach. Vanderbilt was embarrassed by the way they treated Perry Wallace also for decades, but then eventually realized this is part of our story. This man's just been trying to tell the truth for 30 years, and we've been pushing off the truth, and so finally a new administration came in, new generations of students, student body became more diverse, demanding stories like this, and Perry, to his credit, was willing, even though it could be perceived as too little too late, to come back and still tell his story, even though he'd said for 30 years, I'm ready to tell my story, and no one wanted to hear it. So in my opinion, Major League Baseball and MLB teams should be doing things like this. Tell Glenn's story, learn from it. No one's going to hold you responsible anymore for what happened in 1977 if you're making honest progress now. Perry used to say, reconciliation without the truth is just acting. And a lot of times people will have a photo op just for the purpose of pretending to show the world that everything's good now, but the truth has to be present in that. And I think telling Glenn's story, the full story, is introducing the truth of the LGBT experience within Major League Baseball, and that you can only improve from there rather than pushing it away.
Absolutely. So let's imagine you at your computer, day one, page one, paragraph one, about to write about Glenn Burke.
Yeah.
How do you go about digging up information on a guy who's been dead for nearly 27 years?
Yeah. Well, the research is by far my favorite part of working on a book. I enjoy that much more than the writing. I like speaking about the books too. I looked at some things you might imagine, rosters of every team Glenn played on. Tried to talk to as many of his teammates as I could. Was reading a lot about the Castro district, San Francisco, where Glenn lived during the off season, looking for people who were there then that are still alive. Reading every newspaper article I could find about. It's sad that Glenn was pushed out of Major League Baseball in 2.5 years, but that gave me a relatively small window to look at in terms of his Major League career. I was also talking to his minor league teammates. His sister Lutha was incredibly helpful. I found a friend of Glenn's. Glenn has an inspiring and a tragic life. He's inspiring for obvious reasons. Tragically, he's experiences homelessness for few years before he passes away of AIDS. I found a friend of his. So Glenn's homeless. His friend is an heir to the Levi Strauss fortune. They just knew each other randomly through some pickup basketball games.
Yeah.
And so this Mr. Goldman kept copious notes about trying to help Glenn get off the streets, had the names of social workers that were coming to find Glenn in these hotels in the Tenderloin in San Francisco. And one of the names was kind of unusual. It was like Googleable name, like it wasn't Joe Smith. So I found this man who had found Glenn living curled up on a mattress on the floor in the Tenderloin, and he told me about that experience of coming across this homeless person and discovering that they had started in center field of the World Series a couple years before that, and that just blew his mind. And so that actually became the first chapter. You talk about sitting down to write it.
Yeah.
I wanted to start with that moment in Glenn's life. Chapter 2 goes back to that high point. So you go from that low point in the hotel to Glenn standing in center field in Yankee Stadium, 1977 World Series, the center of the sports universe at that moment, and then you go back to Glenn's childhood and his rest of his life from there.
So for the people who haven't read the book, I've read the book. I bet a bunch of people here have. We've sort of danced around it.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about him in the World Series. We've talked about him being homeless, passing away in the 90s, and a little bit about his childhood. Can you fill in some of the details? I don't want you to give away the whole story,
Yeah.
but can you fill in some of, like, if you were to give maybe a 2-minute summary of his journey?
Yeah. If Glenn Burke were to walk in this room right now, I think he would be, besides Bryan, the most charismatic person in the room, right? Like, Glenn was a phenomenal athlete. He was a better basketball player than he was baseball player. He led his high school to undefeated championship his senior year of high school. He played college basketball at the same time he was playing minor league baseball. I talked to Rupert Jones, former major leaguer, Dusty Baker, Davey Lopes. All these guys said that Glenn was the most athletic person that they had ever met in their life.
Yeah.
And these are professional baseball players who are really good, And in the 1970s, just being Glenn Burke was sort of challenging a lot of stereotypes. It was assumed that you couldn't possibly be gay and be playing professional sports, right? That's what was written about in all the mainstream sort of sports magazines at the time. Glenn was hilarious. Also, he was a comedian. He imitated Richard Pryor and all the top black comedians of the day. He was the rookie 4th outfielder on the Dodgers 77 team, which was loaded with future Hall of Famers and All-Stars. And Glenn was the most popular player on the team. Dusty Baker told me he was the life of the clubhouse. When he was traded to the A's, Don Sutton and Steve Garvey, who were about as far personality-wise from Glenn Burke as you could get, very straight-laced white guys on the team, were crying at their lockers, when the rookie 4th outfielder was traded. So that shows you the strength of Glenn's personality and charisma. The fact that he would be the guy that invents the high five was not surprising to the people who knew him, that he would be the one to invent this new way of expressing happiness, which makes it especially tragic that in the last years of his life, when he needed other people to support him, he didn't really get that support. When he wasn't somebody anymore, he wasn't the major leaguer anymore. He even faced a lot of sort of cold shoulder in the Castro from people that had loved him before. And so, that's who Glenn was. He loved by the people who knew him. His sister, Lutha, is an amazing person too. I was told she was an angel, and when I interviewed her, she talked about nursing Glenn the last weeks of his life when he was dying of AIDS in her small apartment in Oakland, and just rubbing his feet, and trying to feed him a little bit when he didn't want to eat anything, and she told me about the former major leaguers that would come by to see him, kind of pay their last respects. And that's when Glenn was started to be remembered again, was the weeks before he passed away. And then, like you said, forgotten.
Nothing
For years
Yeah.
after that.
So this guy's Mr. Popular in the clubhouse with his teammates, with the coaching staff. It seems like, from everything that I've read and from your research, where was the turn? What happened that drove him out of baseball?
Yeah. So in the 1977 World Series, Glenn started game one at Yankee Stadium, like I mentioned. He had a good year that year. Rick Monday was the starting center fielder for the Dodgers. He had a bad back. And so Glenn was getting to play quite a bit. In the NLCS against the Phillies, Glenn started all the games against Steve Carlton, the 2 games against Carlton, who was the top left-handed pitcher in baseball at that time. Dusty Baker said that defensively, Glenn was the best at getting a jump on a ball that he had seen, right? So he was really fast, great defensive player. He was not a great major league hitter yet, but a lot of rookies aren't, What ended up sort of being the beginning of the end for Glenn was when he became friends with Spunky Lasorda, who was Tommy Lasorda's son, who was gay. Glenn and Spunky was around the team all the time. Lasorda had sort of a complicated relationship with his son. So at that time, there were a lot of families that were pushing their gay sons and daughters away, and disowning them. A lot of people moving to San Francisco to get away from these family environments. Lasorda would still bring his son around. He wasn't hiding him. He would come to spring training. He was on the plane, on road trips, but he'd never acknowledged that his son was gay when he was. When he died of AIDS, Lasorda didn't acknowledge that either. So Glenn would talk about music. They both loved disco. Lasorda's son was a tailor at like a cool clothing store in LA, and Glenn would go by there shopping. And so they were friends. Tom Lasorda learned about this, and Al Campanis, the general manager of the Dodgers, did as well. And Campanis becomes infamous a few years later on a Nightline interview where he says that African-American people didn't have what he called the necessities to be a manager in Major League Baseball. So he's the same person after that 77 season who calls Glenn in to a meeting up in the Bay Area at a hotel. And Glenn thinks it's to talk about what his role on the team is going to be the next year, because he's had a pretty substantial role as a rookie. Yeah. Instead, that's when Campanis says, "Hey, Glenn, we think that our players play better when they're married, when they're not, out chasing people around, right? The nightlife becomes a little less when they're married. And so we would like you to get married, and we'll pay you $75,000 for a nice honeymoon." And $75,000 would be a nice honeymoon now, let alone in 1977, right? And so Glenn knows what's up, and he says to a woman, and the Campanis says yes, and he says, "I'm not going to do that." And so Glenn knew at that point that his career with the Dodgers was over if he wasn't going to go along with this scheme. And by spring training, this is during the offseason when that meeting happens, by spring training of the next year, there start to be articles in the paper about Lasorda and Campanis being down on Glenn as a player. They don't say really why they don't want him a part of the team anymore. And then a month into the season, he's traded to the Oakland A's, where Billy Martin becomes the manager. Glenn thinks this was going to be a good opportunity for him because he and Billy Martin both went to the same high school, Berkeley High. And Billy Martin's known as kind of a fighter, and Glenn was a really sort of scrappy player too. But I asked some other black players on the team if Billy Martin was racist, and the guys that I talked to said no. Black guys I talked to from that team, but definitely homophobic. And he called Glenn derogatory terms and said he wasn't going to let him on the team. Ask me like one or two more questions, and I want to make sure we have time for me to ask you some questions.
What roadblocks did you run into trying to dig up this story?
There were a few players on the Dodgers who were, you could tell they really didn't want to talk about it. Yeah. Some key players from that team that even Dusty Baker vouched for me with them, but they still wouldn't do an interview. Dodger organization itself wouldn't share pictures or help in any way. Those are the type of roadblocks I ran into, just access to certain people. Since the book has come out, because it's a book intended for adults and for teens, I think the roadblock has been sort of the environment we're in now when it comes to books on issues related to LGBT or race and racism, and just the chilling effect that some of these campaigns or people showing up at school board meetings, the pressure on teachers. I had spent, and Parnassus can vouch for this, I have visited so many schools in 25 states with my previous books. I've been invited to one school with this book. So just getting access to tell this story, which is so needed. You see what happened in Texas today. and what's happening in Florida right now. Kids need to hear stories like this. Is dangerous for story. I'm not saying this because it's my book, but like all books related to these issues are so important for young people. And there's an active effort to suppress them, prevent them from being in schools. It's terrible.
Wow. I guess my final question for you is, what can we learn? What's the biggest thing us in 2022, about to head into a new baseball season, new year, hopefully post-pandemic soon? What can we learn from, it's the biggest thing we can learn from the Glenn Burke story?
Well, I'll put this again in a term that Perry Wallace used. He talks about the lines that connect all of us and how important that is, and to recognize those lines. And so one way I think this book is important, one thing we can learn from it, is the connection between Glenn and the book and you, and now the nonprofit that you've started, right? And so Glenn's biggest hope in life was that his experience, the difficulties he went through, would make it easier for a gay ball player in the future. And he died in 1995 and didn't really get to see that, but if you care about Glenn, you want his hope to materialize. And so seeing players coming out in other sports, seeing you, and Bryan had read the book and told me, he was thinking about doing it, and then you did.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you about how that experience went and what you've done with that, and so you can see the line from Glenn to you to some kid that's going to benefit from your organization. So I think that's probably the most meaningful thing that can come from it, is it being inspiring, his story being inspiring to people.
Wow. Right. How'd I do? This is my first. Nervous. Usually I'm the one that's answering questions.
All right, so I want to ask you some questions.
Okay,
right.
Cool.
So we had coffee at Frothy Monkey. You said you'd been thinking about coming out. You had a lot on your mind because of the two industries you're in. I can't think of, pro sports and country music, probably two tough industries to come out in.
Yeah.
You wanted to make sure that things were like in the right place before you did it. So talk about the environments that you've been in as an independent league ball player, even college baseball player, why that would be an especially tough environment to come out in, and what you needed to know before you made the decision to do it this year.
Totally. So I've always played, baseball, played since I was 6 or 7 years old, and grew up listening to country music. So those are my two passions. And I knew I was a baseball player, and I knew I was a country music fan a lot earlier than I knew I was gay. And, I just so happened to grow up with these things, and then kind of figuring out who I was. It was a really, really intimidating environment to be in pro baseball, and also to come back in the off season and then all of a sudden be in Nashville writing songs where it's a genre that's supposed to be about, or at least in the popular mainstream is about, hooking up with a girl in the back of the pickup truck. And here I am as a gay guy trying to do this. I'm thinking, what do I do? So that's how we got connected. I was really just searching, like I was Googling just gay baseball player, and I couldn't find a single person that was actively playing. And I stumbled upon the story of Glenn Burke, and I had no idea who he was. He passed away before I was born. And I bought the book, and I read the book, and I read Billy Bean's book as well. He's the only active living former major leaguer to come out as gay. I think I got it. And sort of like a mentor and hero figure of mine that I've been able to talk to since coming out. But Glenn's story was tough to read about. I mean, I read yours. I watched the documentary. It's available online. You just Google Glenn Burke, and you'll be able to find it. And I sent you an email, I think. Mm-hmm. And I was just, thinking about, what if I do this? I don't, growing up, it would have meant the world to me if I had been able to see somebody like me playing Major League Baseball. They say, if you can see it, you can be it. Well, what happens when, you're on the team and you're in the locker room and they say, F you, faggot, or whatever? I don't want to we hear that type of stuff every day, and that can be such a bad environment to grow up in when you are who they're talking about. And, it would have meant the world to me if I had known about Glenn Burke, if he had somehow been able to survive on the Dodgers, keep playing, come out, all these things and be embraced. And it just didn't happen. And so, that's how we ended up meeting that Frothy Monkey before last season. And I was just asking you questions about him and his story. And I guess that sort of segues into how I came out. I always, thinking back on it, I was at Christmas at my boyfriend Max's house, his mom's house, for the first time. And we took this great picture under the Christmas tree, me, him, and his mom. And at that point, I was in between contracts for baseball. I was about to sign to indie ball, but I wasn't quite there yet. And I had kind of been given advice by people who I trust, people who'd gotten me there in baseball. We know about you. We're okay with you, but don't you ever say that publicly, because it'll be the end of your career. That's it. You can kiss that dream goodbye. And, I was at Christmas and we took this great picture under the Christmas tree, and I really wanted to post it, just put it on Instagram. It wasn't anything scandalous, just under the Christmas tree. And I decided not to do it because I thought I would never get a job in baseball again. And that really ate at me for a while. And I decided then and there that if I was on a team, if I was playing well, if I was secure and I felt like I could do it, I would be the guy. And if nobody else did, obviously I'm an independent baseball player. It would be a lot better if a star player on the Yankees or the Red Sox or whoever came out, but there really wasn't anybody else. And I just kept thinking about, little 14-year-old me, who realized at that age that he's different and couldn't see anybody else like him. And that's why I decided to share my story, being both in baseball and country music, really just starting out as a songwriter. But that's who I am. And representation in both of those places isn't great compared to other industries. I mean, I would say that country music is actually better than baseball in many respects, with there's many people in country music that are paving the way. But in baseball, really it's been Glenn, it's been Billy Bean, who is currently in charge of, I think, diversity and inclusion maybe for Major League Baseball, works in the commissioner's office. And that was really it. And it's sort of your question. I don't want to take up too much time.
Yeah, I got more for
to talk about our charity a little bit. Really, it all came about on National Coming Out Day in October. And I just thought, in this day and age, when you can take this out and Google anything, like, for better or worse, the sum of human knowledge is on each of our phones. And yet some kid in Mississippi or Texas or a ball player in South America or wherever, can't find one other person like themselves in a game played by over 16 million people in the United States alone and countless millions more overseas. And you can't find one other person in the LGBTQ community like yourself. That's why we created Proud to Be in Baseball. It's really just a website. You input your information and we match you. We will put you, if you're a high school player, we'll put you in a group with other high school baseball players. College players go in their group. Pro players go in their group. And, I know that, if I was in high school and Glenn Burke was still alive, I don't know if I would have the courage to contact Glenn Burke and ask for advice. That's intimidating. But what you can do is build community and talk to people your own age and find friends that also play baseball. And that's what Proud to Be in Baseball is. We've turned into, I think we're evolving. We're evolving every day. We're so new. It was really unexpected. I just wanted to create this support group, but we clicked go on the website, and 4 hours later, we were on the cover of USA Today. And we didn't have, we weren't advertising. We weren't really pursuing that. But I think just because it was a new idea, that's why it caught on. And during Pride Month this year, we're going to be doing a ton of different events at minor league stadiums and major league stadiums around the country. And what we hope to do is both be the resource for ball players and other people in baseball, coaches, anybody who's really involved in baseball at any level. But another part of it is going to be advocacy stuff, working hopefully with Major League Baseball teams and maybe with Major League Baseball or whoever's willing to work with us to try to improve the environment, because teams will hold Pride nights, they'll sell rainbow merch, but there's definitely something that's holding people back. And I don't think that I should have been, me as a little independent pro baseball player shouldn't have really been the guy to do this. It should be somebody with a big major Nike deal, Under Armour deal, making tens of millions of dollars in the major leagues and can be a national visible symbol. But clearly the environment's not really there in a lot of places to support a queer athlete. I think we're slowly getting there, but what we want to do at Proud to Be in Baseball is work with athletes at the high school level and the college level and the pro level and really improve the environment overall and create the culture that players like me never had as a little league, high school, American Legion, whatever, baseball player. And that's what we're doing.
That's awesome. I know we want to take some questions from the audience. I wanted to ask you one last question. So you talked about the environment not being there, but when you told me the story of how things went when you did come out, there were two anecdotes that you told me that I was just blown away by. One was your reaction from a certain teammate, and the other was the reaction of an opponent. Can you tell everybody those stories?
I was convinced, I had come to grips with the fact that if I was coming out, it might be the end of my time in baseball, just because of, we've heard so many negative things about the environment. And what I found was actually quite the opposite on the ground floor level. I think the story that you're referring to, one of my teammates was a super macho dude. He'd actually gotten in a few fights over the course of the season with different people on other teams and on my team. And he's just like this big macho Puerto Rican dude. And I thought, oh my God, if I come out, this guy's going to have a problem with me. I might, encounter trouble walking into the clubhouse. And I came out and I walked in that day. I really didn't know what to expect. And he came right up to me and I was like, oh no, here we go. And he gave me a high five to Glenn Burke. And he said, I just wanted to thank you because I was raised by two dads and he used to get picked on in Catholic school in Puerto Rico as the guy who had two dads, and he would have to fight his way out of situations in order to just survive. And he said, if anybody says anything to you, they're going to have to go through me. So I knew, I had the most macho guy at my back. And what was the other one?
The opponent on the
mound. The opponent, yeah. So then, I get there, there's cameras there, we're independent baseball. We're not used to playing with people watching us. And I get there and there's people holding up pride flags at the stadium, in the stands when I'm hitting. And I really didn't know what to expect, whether I was going to get booed or cheered, or if I was about to get a 90-mile-an-hour fastball thrown at my head or what. And I got up there my first at bat and I got a hit, and they changed pitchers. And the new pitcher that came in, before he threw his next pitch, he looked at me and he just gave me like the tip of the cap, and I just tipped it back. And the day that I came out was crazy. Nothing can prepare you for getting your 15 minutes of fame, so to speak, for waking up and you're getting notifications about yourself on your phone from national news sites. And I got 6,000 notifications in 48 hours, and I had to turn my phone off. I just put it in my truck and didn't look at it for a while because it was just overwhelming. And it seemed like every person that I had ever met throughout the course of my life, reached out to me. It was just overwhelming in the most positive way. But the thing that was really the most meaningful was to get that peer-to-peer recognition on the field. I get a hit, do my job, get to be a baseball player. And those guys, there was no issues. They just respect, we got your back. I got to go back to being a baseball player. And I think, to tie this back to Glenn Burke, I think that his teammates, I don't want to give too much away from reading the book, but his teammates had his back. His teammates were the ones that were upset the most when he got traded. And, from reading your book and from watching the documentary, there's some great interviews with his teammates who back that up. And I found the same thing. So it's really interesting. It's a tough cookie, thinking about, why am I the only baseball player, little me in independent baseball, out and proud, in 2022. And when we've seen that your teammates, if you're a good teammate and you play hard and, if you have their back, they'll have your back. And we've seen that. So it's really confusing. Confusing on the one hand, but on the other hand, I totally get it in some respects, why we haven't quite got there in baseball yet. And, that's why I was excited to do this event, because most of the messages that I got were super positive after I came out, but I got one message that was like, "How dare you not acknowledge Glenn Burke?" And I was like,
it wasn't from me.
Glenn Burke. I love Glenn Burke. Yeah, no. And actually, I played in Oregon this past season. And before driving back to Nashville, I was going to drive down the Pacific Coast Highway. I always wanted to drive down. And I had planned to stop in San Francisco. And on the Rainbow Walk of Fame, there's a plaque for Glenn Burke. So because I'd never been to the Castro district. I'd heard about it in your book. In my mind, it's like, I got to see this place, the Castro, where Glenn Burke used to hang out. So I was driving down the Pacific Coast Highway towards Glenn Burke's, neighborhood, when I got the message, "How dare you not acknowledge Glenn Burke?" So, it's really been, a great experience getting to know you and learning about his story. And I hope that if there's anything, positive that we can take from his stories, that years later, decades later, we're just starting to make those steps in baseball to help create the kind of environment that would have benefited a guy like Glenn Burke.
That's great. And maybe there'll be a major league player that has benefited from your nonprofit, right? That'll come along here in the next 5 or 10 years. We can watch for that.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
I don't want to be I don't want to forever be known as the gay baseball player. I want to be known as a baseball player and a good songwriter and somebody who just happens to be in the queer community. You know, I really hope that if we're sitting down talking about this in a year or two, you might have 3 or 4 guys, not just me, to talk to that are a lot better baseball players than me. And I really think that the stuff that we're doing at Proud to Be in Baseball will help get us there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we'll take some time for questions. If you have one, just speak loudly and then maybe repeat it for the people online.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bryan, have you received the songwriting is all about the co-writing?
Yeah.
Have you received the same, figuratively speaking, tip of the cap from songwriters in town?
That's a great question. I was nervous, you know, this season it came out. Actually, a lot of people that I had worked with already knew, just because songwriting's so personal, you kind of have to be honest in that room, you know, trying to, especially as a songwriter, my job is to help the artist tell their story. And I always thought, like, how can I do that if I'm not honest about mine? So a lot of the people that I work with here have known for a year or two about me. But I was definitely nervous, you know, playing out. I played writers' rounds around town, and definitely nervous, you know, if people were how I was gonna be received. And I think most people have really embraced it. You know, I'm busier than I've ever been with songwriting. So I think maybe that's your answer. You know, I got co-writes, and I'm writing every day. And I think that country music is probably a little bit ahead of baseball. Yeah. Anybody?
Question. First of all, thank you for sharing your story. I think it's incredible to have the courage to do that. And one thing that struck me is that you said this more than once, that you wish you had someone as an example, someone as a mentor. So after your experience coming out, has anybody reached out to you to be that mentor for them, and how's that experience?
It's been, so I sort of did have a mentor. You know, I had Billy Bean, who's like the best mentor to have if you're me. You know, he's the one living major leaguer who's come out as gay after he retired. And, you know, I've been able to go in there. He works at the commissioner's office, been able to go in and get advice from him. So I definitely wasn't fully alone. If I didn't have him, I don't know. He's definitely helped me avoid some pitfalls where I could have slipped up in different situations, and helped me navigate. But being on the other side of it it's kind of surreal now. You know, I've got messages from athletes, not just in baseball, but in other sports. The people who message me tend to be, maybe it's just because I do baseball and country music, but they tend to be more of like the macho football player that nobody knows about, or the basketball player, or the college baseball player, or you know, it's I don't know, you know, what kind of advice I can give those guys. If there's a high school kid who's reached out to Proud to Be in Baseball and is like asking me how to ask his same-sex, you know, boyfriend, partner, whatever, to prom. Like, I came out last year. I don't know. I don't know. But part of what I kind of recognize that part of what we've done with Proud to Be in Baseball is I found 2 other guys. I found a kid who's really mature kid. He's in college now, who came out while he was playing high school baseball, and he helps with the younger demographic. I found a kid who's not a kid anymore. He's my age, doesn't currently play baseball, but he was out to his team while he was in college. So what we've been able to do between the three of us is kind of cover different demographics. I'm a lot more comfortable talking to the pro guys, talking about what the environment's going to be like in spring training in the locker room, or what's going to happen with the media, because I certainly felt that with my thing. I don't know how to help a kid ask his boyfriend to the prom. So I think that, I'm trying to give advice to as many young athletes as I can. But even the ones that I don't know how to help, I hope that I can help them find somebody who can help them. Yeah.
Frederick.
Andrew, you talked, and I know your focus ever since the first full edition of Strong Inside has been young adult, getting kids there. You talked earlier, and you've got an example of somebody who's been affected by your book, and your book has had an impact. You also talked about how schools are less open to talking about this book. What kind of initiatives need to be done? How can we get this kind of story into the hands of the young readers you're writing it for?
I should also clarify that I'm not talking about desire by teachers or librarians to have these books in the schools. I think it's pretty clear that they would like to, and Tennessee Library Association is fantastic, and they're doing really good work and showing up in the legislature. I see Representative John Ray Clemens here. Thank you for being here. And, trying to, it's not John who's doing this. He's fighting the good fight. I think that as parents, being a parent, I need to support and vocally offer support to teachers and librarians to stand up at PTA meetings, right? Show up at school boards. I was talking to Jeff here, who spoke at a Williamson County school board meeting the other day about how impressed I was with the high school students that came. You may have seen the videos of them standing up for truth and for books. I don't think there's any leeway to just think within yourself that you believe the right thing. Like, you have to do something now, and speak up and vote. And I think it's going to take a lot of people doing a lot of work, because there's a lot of momentum on the other side. I think you see some evidence, like in Virginia, that the other side is not really succeeding maybe the way that they thought they would. That governor is already very unpopular, and the anti-CRT messaging was a big part of why what he ran on in that race. I think as a parent, like, requesting author visits is important. Knowing that there's people that are supportive of this in the school community creates a little bit of a safe zone, for these things to happen. Looking for ways to get these books in the hands of kids outside of schools also, which is something that you're doing.
Yeah.
So there's ability through, I'll let you say it.
Yeah. All right. Well, one of the things that we're starting, I'm proud to be in baseball, we've started to raise some money, is as we do these events, Pride Nights with minor league teams, major league teams, we encourage them to donate. And we've developed a program. It's basically a collection of a few dozen books about LGBTQ athletes in all sports, not just baseball. There really haven't been that many books written about queer athletes at all. So we've developed as big of a collection as we can get. And through us, you can now donate an LGBTQ sports library to the place of your choice, whether it's a school or a university or a community center. What we're going to be doing this summer, and we're starting it in about 6 weeks with my high school, is going to get the first one, first official donation of books. And this book, singled out, is going to be one of the prominent books featured in our collection. It's going to go out. We don't want to just show up at Pride Night, and do our event, take the pictures, and get the donation and leave. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to impact the communities that we visit. So what better way than for a young kid who's struggling and doesn't know who to talk to about it, and he's going into his school or his library or whatever, or maybe his baseball coach sees one of our presentations and they figure out about this book, and hopefully through us, we'll be able to disperse and get this to people who need it. I know how much it helped me being able to hear about what Glenn encountered and how his teammates treated him and his pitfalls and how he navigated that. And that helped me as I came out. And I think that, if other younger ball players hear this story, it will help them as well. So I'm happy to include the book in our collection.
Thank you.
Anybody?
So this is more on the songwriting side of it. So you mentioned that songwriting is a deeply personal experience. So since you came out, has your songwriting changed? And how has the industry worked?
It was always difficult. I always felt like I had to write 2 songs. I might be writing for some random bro, that I found in Midtown who wants me to write him a song for his next EP or whatever. And I'm writing about a girl, but I have to draw on personal experience. So I have to write it in my mind about a previous relationship or whatever. And on paper, it comes out a completely different way. So now it's just kind of eliminated that whole, I feel like the day after I came out, I felt like I woke up and it was like the first day of the rest of my life. I didn't have to hide, I didn't have to lie anymore. I didn't have to show up in the locker room and pretend that I had some mysterious girlfriend back home and, that nobody knew about. And the same thing is going for songwriting. And I really feel like the sky's the limit. And now I'm just going to write, I don't question it. Before I used to doubt everything that I wrote. Oh my God, are they going to know if they hear this line one way? And it's overthinking everything. And, now I can just write and be, and hopefully, be a songwriter and be just like everybody else in country music who's there because they love it and they embrace the storytelling. And it's part of them. And I don't know, hopefully we're here, talking about country music in 10 years with a completely different story to tell, but I'm just at the beginning. So we'll see. Yeah.
Last question.
What song are you most proud of that you've written?
That I wrote? I can tell you one I'm least proud of. And Hayden's going to laugh when he sees this. The most successful song that I've ever had was my least favorite. And it also my other co-writers, we wrote a song called Backwoods Bougie that ran up one of the charts last summer. But that was just kind of dumb. The song I'm most proud of is a song about growing up different. It's called Can't Tell. And I'm going to be part of a sort of a documentary that's coming out later this year, and that'll be in it. So you'll have a chance to hear it there. Yeah. That's cool.
Wow. Thank you all for being here tonight, sharing your story, writing this story. Thank you to Music City Baseball, Nashville Stars for bringing us together tonight, and this incredible opportunity is very appreciated. Thank you for being a very proud member of the Nashville LGBT Chamber of Commerce. Representative John Ray Clemens is here. Thank you, sir, for standing up for our trans youth as you did again this week. We are continuing to advocate at the Hill against discriminatory legislation which harms Tennessee's ability to attract and retain talent, and it harms the LGBT community that live here. We will continue to do that, and we will continue to bring you programs like this. This was incredible. Thank you all for being here. If you're joining us online, good night. I hope you enjoyed that. And we can end that broadcast. If you're here in the room,